Oh, yeah.
Okay. Hello, I'm Katie Bignall, and this is
Brooke Davis.
we are Team 7, and we are going to discuss our windshield activity. So we will start with the first question of the community core, the history. So Brooke, what city did you do for your windshield activity?
So I did kind of like downtown Davenport area. And I guess so the history, I guess there's probably just mainly old buildings down like on the main drive. They're mostly brick. There's a lot of old homes. There's some fancy old historic homes down there as well. And then some old businesses, and some have been renovated and some haven't. So
Yep. Yep. I did the Quad Cities as a whole. I've lived on both the Illinois side and the Iowa side. For people that don't know what the Quad Cities are, we're on the eastern side of Iowa, western side of Illinois, where the Mississippi kind of marries us together. So I found pretty much the same thing as Brooke. Many of the buildings that are close to the river are going to be older, turn of the century, 1900s. Brick, many of them are being renovated. As you get further away from the river on both sides of the river, Iowa and Illinois, the buildings and homes tend to get newer. But still newer is 1960s. So it's a pretty old town when you think of it that way. Looking at the demographics, I found, and chime in, Brooke, that it's predominantly white, Caucasian, about 80%. We have about 10% African American, Black, and about 10% Latino from many different areas, Mexico, Central America, things like that. Did you find anything else you'd like to add?
that's pretty much the same as Davenport, about 10% Black, 8% Hispanic, majority white. So, yep.
Yeah. I also found that a lot of the population is middle-aged to older. So we don't have a lot of young professionals, kind of that 18 to 35 range. We have a fair amount of kiddos, but not, predominantly the population is going to be from 35 and older.
Yeah.
Kind of looking more, diving deeper into the ethnic makeup of the community, kind of what are the resources, grocery stores, restaurants, languages, things like that. What did you find, Brooke?
There are some Hispanic stores, some restaurants. I've seen a number of different churches, Catholic, Baptist. There's about any kind you could want in the area. And then let's see. Yeah, that's about, there's lots of restaurants, like any kind you could want. So downtown pretty much has it all. And it's pretty diverse. Like, it's different than Des Moines because there are a lot of just what my husband would call hole in the wall eating shops, where Des Moines is more like chain restaurants, but Davenport you get a lot of local little shops and things like that. So
Yep, I agree. In downtown, well, kind of outside of downtown Moline, there is a neighborhood that is predominantly Hispanic, and many of the billboards there are in Spanish, not in English. Any kiosk that you might see on a restaurant, menus at the restaurants that are kind of in that area are all in Spanish. So that's kind of a fun little pocket within the Quad Cities where if you don't speak Spanish, you are of the minority. But very much so, there's a lot of mom and pop shops. There's a lot of small little groceries. There's one that is owned by a man from Laos who you can get all kinds of fun spices and things like that over in Moline. But yeah, I agree. There's a lot less chain restaurants when you're looking into ethnic food, and a lot more kind of mom pop that, it's going to actually be ethnic food and not kind of the Americanized version of it. So that's fun to explore. Kind of what are some of the values and beliefs that you might see the community in Davenport have?
I think like the Quad Cities area is pretty Catholic. So, I mean, I think that's, and from Iowa, I think they're kind of more of a conservative for the big town, whereas Des Moines is a little more liberal. I think Davenport and the Quad Cities are just a little more conservative, I suppose, than bigger cities like Des Moines. But yeah.
Yeah. I said, kind of what are the homes and yards like? I said, depending on the part of the Quad Cities that you're in, if it's a more low income location, some of the houses are pretty run down. Some of the yards are not very well maintained. I think a lot of that is just due to those residents being renters versus owning the home. So there's a little bit of a difference in pride, a little difference in expectation of, my landlord's supposed to do that, and the landlord may or may not be doing it. Also, once you kind of get into the Bettendorf, the more affluent of the four Quad Cities, there's a little bit more money. So people may pay to have their lawn mowed versus having themselves mow it. Also kind of thinking about if I'm in a neighborhood where there's some rentals, some apartments, some houses, and it's really interesting to kind of see, what our block looks like versus when I lived in Rock Island on the Illinois side, everybody owned within our little area. So everybody's lawns were well maintained. There was a lot of renovations done on houses, updates, things like that. So I would say it kind of depends a little bit on that as well. I'm trying to think of I delved a little bit into the houses of worship. There, as Brooke said, there's pretty much everything that you could ever think of. We have synagogues, we have Islamic temples, we have a couple Mormon churches, we have all kinds. If you have a faith, universal Unitarianism. I mean, we pretty much have a house of worship and you can find it. But when looking around, there's quite a few Baptists, there's quite a few Lutherans, there's quite a few Catholic churches. So those are probably of the majority when thinking about houses of worship. Let's see here. Also kind of getting into that of, is there public or private art? I would say there's quite a bit of public art. There's a lot more than I was expecting when coming to a Midwest town. I'm not from the Quad Cities, so when I moved here, I was surprised at the amount of public art and statues that was kind of all around. Yeah. But there's also, we have the Figge Art Museum, we have the Putnam. So we have quite a few museums and things that you can be a member of, or you can take your kids to go see, or just kind of see for yourself. So there's quite a bit of that too. Let's see here. So physical environment, what does the community kind of look like as a whole? What are the aesthetics? What did you say for that, Brooke?
So downtown Davenport is kind of like an older community. Some rundown areas and also some areas that have been renovated, a little bit of both. But I think it's more of a diverse, more maybe lower economic neighborhood area. So there's, like you're saying, a lot of the rentals. So there's not that pride or maintenance maybe that they push off on each other, I guess. And maybe just the income's not there to accurately fix it up or maintain their properties as well. So yeah, just an older community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. We have what's called the Arsenal Island, and it's a government island that they make tanks on and ammunition and all kinds of things. And I had the, First Army coming in, and one of the restrictions is those families need to live in houses that are 1970s or later built. And so they really struggled when they were trying to find housing, because a lot of our houses are turn of the century, 1920s, especially in kind of down by the river on both sides. It's hard to find a house that was built after probably even 1940. I mean, most of the houses are going to be a lot older than that. So a lot of old structures, very, very true. Let me see. We're on the Mississippi River, so we have a lot of water sports and a lot of recreational space if you want to bike or walk along the river. So that's kind of nice. We have people that go out in their boats and kayak and do all kinds of stuff like that. So aesthetically, we're an older community as a whole. Health and social services. So this was an interesting one for me. What did you find, Brooke?
I think you can find about anything you want in the area as far as traditional medicine with alternative medicine. I mean, there's a little bit of everything. Like downtown Davenport, they have the hospitals that are fairly close, like nothing's too far to drive to in the area. So if it's not in the area, it's easy to get to, and there's public transportation, or it's not a huge area, so you could walk as well. Most people drive, so in Davenport. So you can find healthcare and social services like within your community or within the downtown area. They're available, readily available. So
yeah, I said there are there's a couple larger hospitals that I find more affluent people are going to versus the smaller hospitals that maybe the more lower income people are going to. I don't know if it's just because the smaller hospitals are more in those neighborhoods. So as Brooke said, they're closer. So those are just the hospitals that they tend to go to. Or if there is a difference in service. I don't know. That's something that might be fun to look into. And Davenport is the home of chiropractic medicine. Palmer College of Chiropractics is the founding of chiropractic medicine. So there are quite a few chiropractic offices around, which I think bring in that more non-traditional medicine side of things. So that was really cool when I moved to this community. I was like, wow, there's a chiropractor everywhere. And the economy, kind of taking a look at what the economy of the Quad Cities looks like.
Yeah, I think I think there are wealthy areas in downtown Davenport. There's a lot of money over when you get to the Bettendorf side. As far as downtown, I think it's just a lower economic status. They're just average families or people with low income housing down there. But definitely in like the Quad Cities area, there is a lot of wealth as well. You go out on the outskirts more so than downtown. So
yeah, very, very true. We have a couple large corporations. John Deere is here. Modern Woodmen of America is here. I mean, there's quite a few larger institutions that do bring in some wealth. But there are also a lot of people that are struggling. Yeah. Let's see here. I think our unemployment rate, if I read it correctly, is at like 4-ish or 5%, which is really pretty good. But that still means that there are people out there that are struggling to find that job. But when you check job posting boards like Indeed.com, things like that, there are always positions open. It just might be the qualifications of the people don't match up with that position. All right, let's see. So transportation and safety. What did you think of the transportation and safety in downtown Davenport?
Well, every time I've been to downtown Davenport, I've seen an officer, a cop, or somebody. So I think not that they necessarily make me feel safe down there, because I don't know that I would at night. So the safety is kind of, I think it's a more unsafe area. there are little pockets of unsafe areas, not like the whole downtown Davenport is unsafe. And I mean, people walk downtown, they've got public transportation, and that takes them out of the downtown, out like to more closer to Bettendorf or other areas. Majority of people in the Davenport area do own a car and are 2-car households. So, I mean, most people drive or carpool or something like that. But I mean, downtown, you could even bike their paths. I mean, it's set up for walking as well. So,
yeah, I agree. I think that's pretty true of most of the Quad Cities. There's pretty good public transportation. You know, there are pockets of unsafe locations, and it kind of depends on the time of day that you're down in those areas. I've found that a lot of the gun violence that's going on is between, I don't know if I would call them gangs, but groups of people that are kind of feuding. So it's not necessarily that, you know, they're going out and committing violence against people they don't know. Excuse me. It seems to be a little bit more centralized on a feud.
yeah.
So politics and government. This one was a little tough for me. What did you think?
Yeah, I didn't notice any signs down there. I would, as far as politics go, and big cities are usually pretty liberal. We're kind of, when you get downtown, they're more liberal than they are in the outskirts or even in the farmland area. So probably more liberal downtown than conservative in the outskirts or even in the farming community.
Yeah. I said that, we have politics going on, but it doesn't seem to be something that's like always in your face. Yeah. People will maybe put out yard signs or things like that, but it's never like, I don't ever see fights over it or, things like that. I know when kind of going along with what you said, that it's a little more liberal downtown, when we've had like Black Lives Matter rallies or, Me Too movement, things like that. Those movements never really have a lot of protesters or a lot of, adversity. And I don't know if that's just people drive by and they go, whatever, I'm not going to deal with that. Or I don't know, but I haven't ever seen like a riot break out over the Black Lives Matter movement, but people still will come out for it. So, I couldn't see that necessarily out in the more rural areas. Because I think, as you said, the views are just different, but I think we're kind of just very moderate in that way of like, some people will get involved, but people don't come back at them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And communication. So, how does the Quad Cities and downtown Davenport stay informed?
Yeah, well, the internet, does a lot. But even like in the parks and stuff, there are signs up or flyers or like I said, a lot of things nowadays are online, or the activities in downtown are on Facebook or all those other things, Twitter and whatever that I don't know.
Yeah, right. That's not how I'm getting my news, but
yeah, that's not how I get it. But yeah, so it's kind of a little bit of everything, I guess.
Yeah. I don't think I could add anything to that. I mean, absolutely everything that you said. Education. So I don't have any kids, so I'm coming at it from just the physical structures that I see. But Brooke, you have some kids, so.
I do. I don't have any in public school, so I can't attest there. I do know they are having troubles in the area with poor quality of education, closing some schools down. So I know that downtown area schools and high schools are not like highly sought after because they just don't have that good level of education. And there are several private schools. A lot of them are Catholic in the area. Their Catholic schools here are pretty big. But yeah, I think they're struggling downtown Davenport in the inner city kind of with education. So you get farther out in the suburbs, and I think the quality goes up quite a bit because I know Durant is our school district, and they're pretty good. So, like most big cities, they struggle in the inner city with education. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I grew up in Minnesota, so all of our schools were not walkable. They were much further away. So when I moved here, I was very impressed with neighborhood schools. So most kids within kind of the city, whichever city it might be, they can walk to school, whether that's elementary school, middle school. For all of these cities, so Bettendorf, Moline, Rock Island, and Davenport. Davenport's the only one that has more than one high school. All the other cities just have one high school. So Moline High School or Rock Island High School. But Davenport does have three. I don't know if the population quite supports all three. I think some of them are losing enrollment, but they still choose to have the three and keep them open. But, you know, so that makes it a little bit easier for the population of Davenport to find a high school close to them, whereas the other three, they might have to bus the kids in from a little bit further away. But as for like the elementary schools and middle schools for all four of the cities, most of the kids walk to those. So, and recreation, what do we do for fun here?
I don't know. So downtown in Davenport, I mean, they have parks, they have the sidewalks along the river walks. They've got baseball diamonds down there. I mean, I think downtown Davenport has most of the weekend entertainment, the casino. There's a theater downtown. I think you can get just about everything here that you can in a big city, just not as many of them. So.
Yeah. Sorry, you froze there for a second. Yeah, I mean, we're definitely not a big city, so we don't get all of the huge performers coming through or anything like that, but we get a fair amount. You know, we have a couple larger auditoriums within the Quad Cities as a whole. We have a CHL hockey team, so kind of third bar hockey team. We have a baseball team. So there's kind of those kinds of fun environments too. But if you have a hobby, there's most likely you can find somewhere that you can accomplish that hobby within the Quad Cities. So kind of into the last perceptions and reflections on the community, what would you say is our greatest strength? What do you think is Davenport's greatest strength?
I think they're small enough that you feel like you're a community, even in the more unsafe areas that it's not as like an Omaha type downtown. So you don't really feel real unsafe anywhere, maybe at night if you were driving around. But I like this. It's small enough, yet big enough to offer quite a few different things for entertainment and stuff. So,
yeah. I said that we're a very giving community. There's a lot of times where there will be, most recently, there was like a donation call for items that people can't buy with food stamps. So that's going to be cleaning items, diapers. I mean, things that people aren't going to be able to buy with food stamps. So one of our local TV stations did a huge call, and people came out and they had, I think it was 2 moving trucks and 2 vans worth of items that they can donate to the local shelters. So as a whole, I think our community is pretty giving. If there's a need to help your neighbor, then people will generally go out of their way to help those around them, which is great. What would you say is our greatest weakness?
I I think it's a struggling, like we have a low unemployment rate, but I think there's it's maybe a more of a struggle to find um, jobs or move around in jobs. There's not a lot of opportunity. That there's enough clearly, but you don't have all the high tech companies other towns do. I mean, it's a river town, so some of those jobs are closing down now. So I guess that the struggle is like keeping companies here, and I guess if you want other opportunities, you have to kind of seek a bigger city than what we have here. So
Yeah, I agree. I commented on the jobs as well. We used to have a plant that made items for case and for harvester, so tractor items. And when that plant closed, we lost a lot of jobs, a lot of blue collar jobs. And I think we haven't replaced them. So a lot of those people moved out of the Quad Cities or are part of that unemployment. And so that for me is kind of sad to see. And also, as Brooke said, I think we have a big emphasis on education. And once we have educated our youth, they don't have the opportunity to find a job here in the Quad Cities. So that means that they're moving to Chicago, they're moving to Des Moines, they're moving to Minneapolis, they're moving where else in kind of the Midwest or East West. So it's wonderful to have that emphasis on higher education, but we just don't have the jobs to actually support those people once they've graduated, which is kind of hard to see. So we lose a lot of that chunk of young professionals. So kind of last, what are some areas of concern in the community?
I think safety, and I know we have a pretty high crime rate compared to some other cities in Iowa, so that's concerning. And then the public schools, I think could use some improvement, or I don't know if there's not enough funding, but those are, yeah. And then the getting jobs and companies here to keep people around, because like you say, we lose a lot of people to other towns that have more opportunities.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of, going off of that, went with we have a lot of isolation. So the people that have wealth have kind of isolated themselves away from the lower income areas, whether that be in Davenport, whether that be in Moline, where, you know, wherever it might be. You know, as a whole, Davenport and Rock Island are not very wealthy cities. You know, Moline and Bettendorf kind of have the wealth, with Bettendorf kind of being the top of the wealth. So people have kind of isolated themselves away. So they're not seeing this poverty in their everyday life. You know, they're not going to the same grocery stores, these people that are using food stamps and WIC. They're not going to the same churches necessarily, or worship locations. They're not going to the same stores, you know, so they're not necessarily seeing this on a daily occurrence, which makes it sometimes not be on their mind that there are people within their own community that have a need, whether that be low income, unsafe housing, you know, kind of whatever it might be. So kind of going off of that, I know that Brooke and I have kind of talked a little bit about this, but one of the things that really drew me when I was going through this was kind of that housing aspect and the lower income, unsafe, the housing that might not, you know, the landlord might not be taking care of it, so it might be unsafe. I know I in my previous life, I worked at Augustana College, and some of our students partnered with Genesis Hospital to go through one of the neighborhoods in Davenport and look at the conditions of the houses, because that can really determine what the lead paint is and what the lead pipes are. And if you have children, lead poisoning is a, you know, I think Genesis was seeing a lot of lead poisoning. So they wanted to do something about that. So when I heard about that project, I was like, oh, Yikes, there's a lot of unsafe housing with that. So no, Brooke and I kind of discussed and we were like, what could we do to give back to our community? And both of us were like, Habitat for Humanity. What a better way to actually give back to the community than at the person's most safe space, which is their home. Do you want to add anything on that?
Nope, that's kind of, yeah, you hit the points on that. That's where, I mean, I think that will help them the best in the community is right at their home. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We see, as I said, a lot of giving back through donations and things like that. But I think when people think deeply, they're not as willing to say, well, I'll help you build a house or I'll help you renovate an older home or, let's scrape all the paint off and repaint and all that kind of stuff. So I think it'll be a good thing for us to be able to see some of those areas in the community that we can help and that need the most help, along with learning some skills that we can pass on. Yeah. So I think that is it for us. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you later.
Yeah. All right.
Bye.
Bye.